There are extremists out there. There are incredibly hateful people. There are terrorists. There are people causing each other harm and violence every single day. But all of those people are human beings who can be moved onto this process and path of turning around from that hatred towards more love and more hope. And yeah, I think that's really inspiring. Hi, I'm Bjørn Ihler and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
Bjørn, how are you?
Hi. I'm good, and you?
I'm doing very well. Doing very, very well. Are you in Norway right now?
No, I'm in Turkey.
In Turkey, great. What part?
Yeah. Istanbul.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. I hope to travel there someday. I've seen lots of pictures and looked up lots of ways I could try to get there to travel. And it looks fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic city. So I'm happy to live here for a year and a half now.
That's great. So are you pursuing your master's there? Is that why you're in Turkey?
Yeah.
Okay. So your master's is in peace and conflict studies.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Like, I didn't even know there was a master's in that.
Yeah, it's a fairly kind of new program. It was developed actually in Norway in like the 60s and 70s as a field of study that is a multidisciplinary kind of field of study that connects kind of international relations with more psychology and all sorts of things really that kind of helps in understanding processes of building peace, both kind of for individuals and for communities.
Gotcha. Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So it's Bjørn Ihler, is that right? Ihler, is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
I'm so used to people just saying it however they like, so I'm fine with it.
How would you say it?
Bjørn Ihler.
Oh, boy. Okay. Bjørn?
Yeah.
Say your last name one more time, your way.
Ihler.
Ihler.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I usually go by Ihler in like English-speaking contexts.
So the ER is pronounced a hard K sound in
Letter.
Norwegian.
It's like a hard R sound.
Oh,
like,
okay.
doesn't really exist in English.
Ihler.
Ihler.
Ihler. Okay. Ihler.
Yeah.
Bjørn Ihler. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I can work with that.
You
man.
don't have Norwegian R's in English, so.
That's
You're
great.
Chris Williams, right?
Chris Williams, you got it. Yep.
Yeah.
A good old straightforward,
That's
boring
straightforward.
American name.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
No, it's a fairly straightforward name.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
You're right. So Bjørn, if I get this right, you're an activist, an artist, a writer, a playwright. You're very involved in the arts, and you've been very influenced by the attacks in Norway in 2011, the terrorist attacks. And you've you've definitely taken your passion for the arts and for expression and storytelling in particular, and you're using that to heal communities and take a narrative and really understand how that narrative can work in healing communities. Is that the right track?
Very much, yeah.
Yeah. That's why you attracted our attention, because we're obviously looking for people who are delivering hope in a community, and we've not talked to anybody like you yet who's actually studying storytelling and using that medium in particular, and particularly somebody who's come from a background that's been influenced and impacted by a terror attack.
Yeah.
So, man, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, no worries.
So let's ask these 5 questions. You know how this works. We are asking 1,000 people around the globe the same 5 questions about hope. And
yeah. I read something about this in on your website.
Yeah. It's really fun. We get really diverse answers, and from a really diverse group of people. You may be one of the first Norwegians we've talked to. So how many people are in Norway? Any idea?
It's like 5 million. So
Okay.
It's a fairly small American state.
Fascinating. So here's the thing. So every 8 million people on the planet, if you divide world population estimates by 1,000, it's one person for every, 7 or 8 million people.
Yeah.
So you may be our only survey respondent from Norway, because we're really trying to keep this true to global population numbers.
Yeah.
Wow, man, that's cool. No pressure. You're representing.
Yeah.
It's like the Olympics for hope.
Yeah. Representing 8 million people is like quite rough.
You're gonna do great. All right, so let me ask you these questions. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. First, Bjorn, what is your favorite quote about hope or your definition of hope?
Good question. There's always hope is a quote from The Lord of the Rings and the Battle of Helm's Deep, where Aragorn is, at least in the movies, it's not necessarily in the books, I don't remember, but in the movies there is like this young boy who's very worried about the battle, and it's his first battle that he's fighting in. And Aragorn, who's this massive hero in the books and film, he talks to the young lad and says, like, there's always hope, because he's about to give up on hope when they are besieged by 10,000 orcs and there's very little hope. But, you know, the fact that there's always hope is you know, something that I promote as well.
Beautiful. I think you're right. I think actually Tolkien put that in the book too. I've read those and watched the movies not too long ago.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of kids and we've probably seen them 10 times, but man, it's great. What a great
I
story.
think you'll find that a lot of like my philosophy and work is very much based on fantasy literature. So like Tolkien and J.K. Rowling are like the major things I based pretty much all of my work on. So
that's storytelling though, right? That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah. That's the point. Is like how those stories that are so big parts of me, because I was one of those people who camped out in tents outside of the cinema in line for tickets for The Hobbit and things like that, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So, you know, those stories is something that's been part of shaping me and shaping my way of dealing with my own trauma and my own way of kind of figuring out life, really. And that's, you know, everyone has a set of stories that shape their lives. So my question has been like, how do we shape the stories that shape people's lives to make people's lives better? And I think these are pretty good stories to base your life off of.
Man, you're right. You're right. I love it. We have a lot in common. We actually were at the very first showing of The Hobbit in our city, in Memphis, Tennessee, in the United States, at midnight when it opened. Same thing. We have a passion for that too.
That's awesome.
And there were so many people there dressed up. There was a lot of Gandalfs in the crowd.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of Frodos.
Yeah.
I know Frodo's in the Lord of the Rings, but there were a lot of Frodos at the Hobbit show.
Yeah. I went this, I think Strider, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Man, that's great. Yeah, I think he's the coolest guy in the movies, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's do this some more. Tell me some more great stories. I love this. So, question 2, in your real life, who has given you that kind of hope? Who's really delivered that to you?
I think there's been a lot of very influential people in my life, and like it's everything from like my parents, obviously, like been building me up all my life. My philosophy teacher back in Norway, he grew up on the borders between the north and south of Ireland, and he really kind of instated. He was also my like thesis advisor for one of my earlier kind of studies in peace and conflict studies, and he was very good at kind of, even though he grew up in basically a war zone, knowing that there was possibilities for humans to do something better. And after the terrorist attack in Norway in 2011, he was actually like one of the first people I called, and one of the first people who came to speak to me and help me out. And he told me a story of like when he first started to study, he moved to Belgium, and he was walking down the street with like some of his friends, and a car backfired, and he was like lying down on the ground flat instantly, because that was his normal reaction from back home in Ireland. And he told me about like the process of learning to know that it was okay with things like that, and it's a very long process, and it's something I struggled massively with in 2011, 2012, and something I still struggle with. But kind of he instated that hope that it's possible to get beyond that. It's possible to get beyond your instinctive reactions to violence, and it's possible to rationalize it and to learn to frame it in a different way, where it can actually be something empowering and something you can use for something useful in your life.
That's really hopeful stuff. Anybody who's struggled with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what that is,
Yeah.
They will hear that loud and clear and know that it's extremely challenging to get past.
Yeah, no, it's like it felt impossible up until he told me his story. And giving that kind of hope in just like the first week after the terrorist attack in Norway, planting that seed is something that has grown into a massive strength in me, but also something that has been very helpful to know kind of intellectually that this is possible throughout my entire process of healing. So, yeah.
Good for you. Good for
Thank
you.
you.
Wow. So Bjorn, take us back then, now that you're kind of on that vein, take us back to a time, tell us a story, and explain to us what it was like, what the world was like when you had to really come through something difficult and use that hope to get through. I don't know if it's the terrorist attacks or some other time in your life, but tell us what it was like. Take us there.
I mean, like the most traumatic event in my life was the terrorist attack in 2011, which happened in Norway. There was a far-right extremist who went out to Utøya Island, where I was in summer camp, and he killed 69 of my friends and tried to kill myself. And
so you're at summer camp on an island.
Yeah.
And this person comes out and kills 69 of your friends, and you survived somehow.
Yeah, so, well, I had the experience of the terrorist, the shooter there. He pointed his gun at me at one point and fired, and the bullet flew straight past my head. So at that point, I was absolutely certain I was going to die, and I'd been hiding along with two kids, 8 and 9 year olds, who were there with their parents and their fathers. There were security guards in there, and among the first people to get shot. But I picked up these kids during like the 1.5 hours the massacre lasted, and we were trapped on this island. We couldn't really go anywhere, and we ended up in a position where the shooter, aimed at me and fired, and he missed luckily. And I think he thought he hit me because I fell over. But that moment is so surreal because. It came clear to me in a very short matter of time that this was probably my last moment, and it was surreal and strangely peaceful. I came to terms with it, sort of, that this was the end, and then kind of realizing that I'd survived that was very difficult and very weird, and kind of I kind of take that point as like a new starting point, and that sort of makes sense because like people speak about like being given a new chance, right, at life, but more because everything at that point was erased. Everything that had led up to this point in my life ended, sort of, because I was so prepared for that to be the end. So I've described it as my soul leaving my body in some sort of ways, and my project afterwards has been piecing back together that soul. And as part of that, and as part of that process, it's been incredibly important to have like little nuggets of hope to hold on to, like the story from my professor, but also. Another kind of key element was back in 2014, which was almost 4 years, almost 3 years after the attack. I met with a man who had been in Breivik's shoes, in the terrorist shoes. He had been a far-right supremacist. He had been violent. He had attacked people. He was from Canada, the first one I met. And he had turned his life around completely and was now working against violent extremism and against hate and for a more loving and inclusive world. And after meeting him, I've met several other people who have turned their lives around similarly. I met a man who in Sweden stockpiled weapons in the woods in order to attack the Swedish parliament, a far-right extremist.
Wow.
I've met the founder of the largest far-right extremist movement in the US, who is now working in an organization that connects together neighborhoods in Milwaukee, which is an extremely diverse city, but also an extremely segregated city. So I've met incredible people who have been in incredible positions of hatefulness and of violence, and who have turned their lives around. And I find something incredibly powerful and hopeful and inspiring in the fact that even those people who have kind of deprived other people of their humanity to such an extent, have been able to realize their own, not only their own humanity, but also the humanity of the people around them, and turn their lives around and really kind of highlight that humanity in bringing people together. If those people can do it, then we can do it. And it also gives me hope in terms of, like, there are extremists out there. There are incredibly hateful people. There are terrorists. There are people causing each other harm and violence every single day. But all of those people are human beings who can be moved onto this process and path of turning around from that hatred towards more love and more hope. And yeah, I think that's really inspiring.
That's really inspiring. When you met with that first person in 2014 who was involved in previous attacks, was it hard for you to, even though that was not your attacker, was it hard to forgive that person? Did you have a grudge going into it, or was it immediately just another person? I
didn't have a grudge towards him. I was scared, like I was terrified. Yeah. And the meeting was very kind of well planned, and there was a friend and colleague who arranged for the meeting to happen in the first place, and we met in a public place, and actually in the Waterstones in Piccadilly Circus in London. Like, it was a bookshop, and I was comfortable there.
Yeah.
There were people around, and like things like that.
You had your copy of The Hobbit with you?
I didn't actually. No.
It would have been a good idea.
Yeah. No, but like, he met me with incredible kindness and with an incredible understanding of the very difficult situation I was in meeting him. Because this was a man who, like, very much one of the things I knew about him was that a few years ago he would have killed me. Like, he would have wanted to kill me. And it's very difficult to kind of meet people who, you know, at some point wanted to kill you, in that sort of way. And it was very surreal. And he turned out to be very different from what I expected, and I think that was a very good thing. Because I expected, like, this brutal kind of macho, like, skinhead kind of guy. Like, sure. A lot of these former extremists are like that, but this guy, he's a tiny little Canadian dude who is studying law, and like, he's intellectual kind of. His blog is called Scholar from the Underground or something like that, I think. And like, he was much more like, when he was back in the movement, he was incredibly violent, but he was also an ideologist. So he was able to explain to me some of the paths and patterns of the people who end up in positions like Breivik, and that was also incredibly helpful. So it's just a life-changing experience and a life-changing meeting there. And like, right now, some of my closest colleagues and friends are people who, you know, have been in that kind of movement, and who are doing incredible work to end extremism.
Wow. That's an amazing story. That's amazing that you've had someone like that share hope with you. And I agree. There are people like you and me. But it's cool to hear that you've actually, something that's been so hard for you to overcome, a person who's been involved in that has actually turned that around and shared back to you.
Yeah. And, you know, there seems to be, like, more acceptance of far-right extremists turning their lives around than of Islamic extremists. Because right now we have a very kind of strong narrative of, like, Islamist extremists are terrorists, and they will always be terrorists, and they deserve us killing them, essentially. But also a lot of the people I meet with and work with are former Islamic extremists, people who have been fighting in militias, who have been part of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, things like that. And they've also turned their lives around and come onto a path of peace. And I think, it's something that is universal there, and something that we can bring out in people through how their minds and lives are shaped and through the stories they believe in. So, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well done, sir. So question 4, how are you sharing hope with people around in your community or the world today?
Good question again. I'm a very humble guy, so that's a difficult question to answer.
Be honest. Be honest, because it's not about, I know you're not bragging. I know you're humble. We've looked you up. You're as quiet as they come from a braggadocio standpoint. You don't tell your story. But I need to hear this, and people from all over the world need to know what could we end up doing someday? What could it look like?
Yeah. No. So what I'm doing is sharing my story and experiences, like I do today now with you. I speak to people, I meet with people, I talk to them, and I think kind of from a human perspective, that's kind of the most important thing anyone can do, is to meet each other as human beings and have a chat. I give a lot of talks at conferences, and this summer I've been lucky enough to be able to speak to a lot of young people around, both in Central Asia and in Europe, and people from all over the world, really. And it's been inspiring to see those kind of gatherings of people, but also to be able to share my story and my perspectives, and my experience of surviving a terrorist attack. But not only that, but also kind of moving beyond that in terms of building more inclusive and peaceful societies. And what I always encourage people to do is really to be a better neighbor and grab a cup of tea with other people occasionally. Talk to people who are radically different from you. Realize that human beings are human beings, and break down those barriers and those stories you believe in that someone else. We have so many stories and narratives about who everyone else in the world are, and they are usually wrong. When you get down to it. So when I moved to Istanbul in Turkey back in 2015, in January 2015. It was a decision I made on New Year's Eve. It was a one-day decision, and then I moved within the month. And I'd never been to Turkey before. I'd never been to a Muslim majority country before, and I didn't know anything about what to expect or anything. And the media in the West, in Norway and England, where I lived and grew up, keeps telling us all these things about who the Turkish people are, and who Muslims are, and how it is in Muslim majority countries, and all of this stuff. And I grew up in a Muslim majority neighborhood of Oslo, so I wasn't I have a basic understanding of Islam and what it means to be a Muslim, but still all of these narratives are kind of dumped upon us. And then I moved to Turkey in a snap decision, and met with people here, and people here are not radically different from people in Norway or people in England or people in the US or anywhere else I've been, really. And people are helpful and friendly, and just living their daily lives and trying to be human beings. And that's also something I realized. I was taking the bus between Ankara and Istanbul on a weekly basis last fall, because my university campus suddenly moved to Ankara for security reasons, which is things that happen in Turkey. But on those bus rides were a large amount of the refugees coming from Syria and from Afghanistan. And, when taking the bus with people for 8 hours, you have a chat with them. Even though you don't necessarily speak the same language as them, that's another matter. But you with hand gestures and a few words here and there, you're able to make out kind of people's stories, and you're able to play with their kids and just be human together. And I think kind of the most important thing I do is to be human with other human beings, but also to teach people that that is something we need to do and something that we should do.
Wow. You're saying so many great things. Thank you. I totally agree. We interview people from all over the world, all walks of life, all religions, political backgrounds, etc. on this. So obviously there's a very diverse population, but you're right. The people who are across the table or across the street or across the town or across the world from you are going to work, trying to pay the bills, feeding their kids, trying to educate their community. They're doing things like you and me, and they're just people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like, one of the key elements in kind of violence and wars and violent extremism and all of those kind of narratives that support those, all the stories that support those things, is the idea that other people aren't people like me. So there is the humanization of other people. Like, if you look to, like, some of the biggest examples are like the Holocaust, where, you know, Jews were being labeled as rats by the Nazi government. In Rwanda, they spoke about Tutsis as cockroaches and like all of those things, right? Like, now we speak about terrorists as terrorists rather than human beings, and we speak about them as monsters and as evil and as fundamentally different from us, and things like that. And like, all of this supports the idea that some human beings are less human than us and thus less worthy of life than us and other basic human rights, really. So like, by breaking down that illusion that some human beings are less human than us, I think we can get a long way in creating a more peaceful world, at least.
You're right. Good answers. All right, question 5. Can't wait to hear you answer this one. So, what are the simple steps, the simple ABCs that I can do and the rest of us listening to you today can do when we get off of this call, this podcast, YouTube video, whatever we're doing? What do we do next to share hope with people around us?
I mean, like I suggested, meet fellow human beings as fellow human beings and have tea with them, really. Tea is a great unifier. I might have lived in England for too long, but, you know.
No. The tea is everywhere. It works. Coffee, maybe coffee.
I find tea better. Tea is a pretty decent thing here in Turkey as well. Like, there's nothing as good as, like, having a cup of tea sitting down at, like, the cafe down the street and, like, meet with some old... I don't speak any Turkish, basically. And, like, there's, like, really old men sitting down there, and they're playing, like, tavla, which is the street game here, and sitting on, like, these very low chairs. And, like, just by being there and drinking tea and, like, playing a game of tavla with them, you know, you break down some of those barriers, and, like, I become accepted in the neighborhood as kind of the weird foreigner who lives here. And, you know, we get to know each other a bit, and, you know, it's all good. So, like, tea is a great unifier. Also, like, there's no place you can't get tea, and, like, there's no kind of stigma in terms of, like, I used to say have a pint, but, you know, there's alcohol in it, and, like, some people don't drink alcohol, and, like, that's totally valid. So tea is the solution.
Tea works.
But one of the things I talk a lot about, and one of the things I recently talked about in a TEDx talk in Bratislava, was bravery and fear. And I find that we spend a lot of time talking about fear and a lot of time being afraid of things and speaking about how scary things are. If you read an average European or American newspaper, there is a lot of kind of fear going on, a lot of really bad stuff that seems to be going on. And, you know, that's the nature of news. But we need to be brave in the face of fear, I find. We need to learn to overcome our fear, especially our fear of other people. And again, that boils down to realizing that other people are other people. And, like, I've met with people who wanted to kill me a few years ago. Like, if I can meet with people who used to be like the guy who tried to kill me, then, you know, how difficult can it be to meet with your neighbor who might have a different faith than you? Like, it's I think we need to be more brave in how we meet the rest of the world. And in most cases, we need to realize that it wasn't anything to be afraid of in the first place, and that's what we in most cases will realize. So yeah, be brave is the simplest answer.
Good advice. I'd like to throw in one thing there for myself, anybody else. You have to realize, since we are all just people, the person on the other side of the teapot from you probably has a story and a narrative about you that's already been given to them, and you have to approach gently, because they may have misunderstandings about you too. It goes both ways.
Yeah, that's kind of key to this whole thing. Is like when you break down those barriers, those are barriers that are two-sided, right? They're between you. Mm-hmm. And you can meet in the middle, but you both have to take the step towards the middle in order to meet. Mm-hmm. And you can help, your fellow human beings with that by being, an open, decent human being. That makes things so much easier. If you approach people with prejudice and fear, then they are not going to be very nice to you.
Right. It'll confirm what they probably already think about you, which might not be well founded, but still.
So when we speak a lot about in kind of the world of working for peace and against violent extremism and terrorism. We speak a lot about the humanization, and we speak a lot about how narratives, how ISIS narratives and things like that are dehumanizing other people. We speak very little about how people, in some instances, also dehumanize themselves and kind of forget their own humanity in many ways, and how kind of in pretty much all media and things like that, we have these narratives of soldiers being very macho, being very not in touch with emotions, and right. Those are the heroes that we promote, right? So when I say be brave, people jump straight to the don't be in touch with your feelings and be all macho and whatnot, and that is not what I mean. Because being brave is acknowledging your own humanity, not suppressing it, which is kind of what we've been taught that being brave is in many cases. Mm-hmm. Being brave is acknowledging what your fears are and recognizing those fears, and then trying to figure out are those fears legitimate or not, and meeting them in some sort of sense. So I think that's important to underline. And again, back to violent extremism, we have a tendency to forget that violent extremists are dehumanizing themselves, but also being dehumanized by us, and in addition to them dehumanizing everyone else. So again, it is the best way to break down all of this is just by being a human being, and being a decent human being in how you approach people. And usually that will be reflected by other people as well. So yeah.
So Bjorn, where do we find more of you? Website, social media, what do you have out there?
Bjorn.ia. I forgot. Bjornih.co.uk is my kind of official website that is currently under construction, but it's semi-functional at the moment.
Great.
And then I have my Twitter account, which is BjornIH. And then I have my Facebook site, which is just Bjørn Ihler. If you search for me, I'm a public figure thing on Facebook, so you can find me there.
Great.
So yeah, those would probably be the best starting points.
Well, Bjorn will look you up for sure. So I think we're pretty connected already. But here's what we're going to do for anybody who's listening. We're going to put all of that at isharehope.com, because I know many of you are out on a run or at the store or driving listening to this thing. So isharehope.com, look for Bjørn Ihler, and we will have all the key quotes, his links, pictures, whatever else we can put in there to get you connected to Bjørn. It'll be right there for you. And feel free to obviously share this story of hope, because boy, it's a good one. Bjorn, I just have a couple of random questions. Can I just fire away a few?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So, when you're speaking and you're dealing with people who might have those presuppositions about another people group that are really ingrained, and they've had really hard traumatic times that you've been able to work through, but a lot of people haven't been able to work through that. How do you move somebody from a reaction of hate and disdain to actually being able to loosen up and start to think about someone else as another human?
So it's a very long process in most cases, and a very tough one, a very difficult one to go through, because it's about shaking up someone's worldview, and they've based their entire lives pretty much on these worldviews, right? So it's always difficult, and it's always going to be painful and difficult. I find in many cases, kind of, when it comes to narratives and storytelling, that is something we have to work on in the long term. Like, we have to work down or break down these stories we tell about each other, and figure out how to tell better stories about each other. And that's a very long process. If you look at, for instance, how Arabs are portrayed in Hollywood movies, like from very early on, then that's a very bad picture, right? And it's a very long process of having built up that picture in Hollywood movies, which is it's going to be a long process to turn that around as well.
Right.
So that might change kind of the next generation of people. For people right now, I think kind of the key element is to introduce people to each other, and create spaces in which people can meet. And there's some pretty awesome like examples of how this has been done in Denmark and other places right now. There's something called the Human Library, where you can basically borrow another human being at the library and have a chat with them, which is a really cool project. And I was like doodling in my head with an idea of like, how do we make a combination of the Human Library and Tinder, where people on their phones can like find other people and have chats with and learn about their lives, which might be radically different lives. So that would be a really cool app to develop. So if anyone wants to help out with that, get in touch. I think like things like that might help. But mostly, again, like it comes to like bringing people together in spaces that they are comfortable with, and creating those spaces. Like in Israel and Palestine, which is kind of the classic example of one of the really bad conflicts, where people really dehumanize each other and find that barrier very difficult to overcome. There are some good examples of things being done. There are youth camps where both sides are engaged in things like creating theater together. I think telling a story together is something that is very powerful, and creating a story of togetherness where there's been stories of dividedness. So by bringing Palestinian kids who have their story about being Palestinian, and Israeli kids who have their stories about being Israeli together, and having them create any sort of narrative about what it means to be them together, is an incredibly powerful thing to do. Another element there from the Palestine-Israel conflict is things like the Parent Circle. The Parent Circle is an organization of parents, mothers and fathers who have lost their kids in the conflict. Palestinian parents who have lost their children to the IDF, parents of people in the IDF who have lost their children to Palestinian rebels. And those people come together and they work together because they recognize that the pain of losing a child is something universal and something that transcends the ideas of what it means to be Palestinian or what it means to be Israeli. There is something universal there. And that's a painful but good starting point in bringing people together, and something that has broken down a massive amount of barriers between people who also haven't had to suffer through that pain to come to it in Israel and Palestine. So I think it's about creating opportunities to meet, really, and inviting people for tea again.
Tell me the name of the organization of your friend in Canada who you met with in 2014.
He doesn't have an organization, but there are organizations like Life After Hate, which is an American organization. There's the organization Serve to Unite, which is the organization in Milwaukee of the founder there.
What was that one again? The one in Milwaukee?
Serve to Unite.
Serve to Unite.
It was launched after the shooting at the Sikh temple in Milwaukee in 2012 by the Sikh community, along with this former Nazi, because the guy who was behind the attack in Milwaukee was a far-right extremist who came from the organization that my friend had been part of founding back in the 80s. So that is currently like one of the largest neo-Nazi movements in the world. Wow. And a guy from this movement came to the Sikh temple where people were coming to pray in 2012, and he killed 6 people. The Sikh community came together with this former neo-Nazi who was the founder of the organization, and they are now working together to create more peace in their city and more understanding of and respect for everyone's right to exist in the community, really, and really more of a sense of community where previously it was not that much sense of community, really. That's a pretty incredible story there as well.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any you don't have to say on the air, but any chance of names or anything like that? Any chance of us getting to talk to your friend who was a former terrorist that really helped you grow through this process, the process of healing?
Yeah, put you guys in touch.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. I'd love to reach out to him.
Yeah.
Great. Bjorn, it's been a privilege. I can't tell you how encouraged and hopeful I am this morning as I'm talking to you, I guess evening your time, but it's been a privilege. It really has been. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, man, we'll talk to you soon, and we will keep up for sure.
Stay in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.